Good morning, guys. Welcome to today's live stream. I want to apologize again for starting earlier than usual. It's been a little chaotic here, so I just want to do it early so there's less distractions going on. Um, and that's the main reasoning why I'm doing these live streams earlier. Of course, always be aware that these are always pre-recorded, so you can always watch them later. And if you have a question about anything, just let me know. You can message me or you can comment on this stream once it's done and posted and just put your feedback on anything, any questions, something that you want to know about what I talk about today. Anytime I'm willing to answer these questions. So just because the stream's over doesn't mean you can't, I can't answer these questions. So again, they're always pre-recorded or not pre-recorded, they're always recorded afterwards and posted. So it'll be here in the group, the Facebook group, and it goes to YouTube as well. I usually post all of my previous live streams to the YouTube channel, so you can watch them there. There's a ton of them that's already uploaded there on different subjects and topics I've discussed before on sort of in my Facebook groups. Um, so that's what I want to mention. That's why I'm kind of starting a little bit early today. Another thing that I want to say too is my 14-day trial for my online fitness program is starting here in a couple weeks, maybe a little bit less than a couple weeks. It starts on March the 6th. I know February is coming to an end pretty soon, which is pretty crazy. So I did want to mention that in advance, that you can sign up for that. I do have the sign up page ready where you can go ahead and sign up. And then once the trial starts, you'll be able to instantly access your workouts and Evolution Nutrition for your meal planning and recipes, things of that nature. That separate app is able to be accessed to all at the same time. So definitely sign up for that. If you want the link for that, let me know. I will repost it again because as it is coming up sooner, I will sort of give you more of the opportunity to sign up for that. So I wanted to mention that in advance as well. As far as everything else, that's pretty much it. Again, I do want to mention I do have live streams on Instagram on Tuesdays, usually midday. Again, for this week, it's been sort of different. For the past couple weeks, it's been somewhat different. So the reasoning because of everything sort of going on, renovations in the house and things of that nature. So that's why I'm sort of doing these early, so there's not as many distractions. So with all that being said, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about in advance. Again, just because this is early and I'm streaming this early does not mean that you cannot ask me any questions. Always comment. If there's a stream that you watched in the past, comment, and I'll be sure to get back to you and answer any questions that you had on that specific live stream. The same with this one. So, with all that being said, let's go ahead and get started with today's topic, which is very important. And it's one of the key components to, creating a workout routine, workout regimen. So what we're going to talk about is core training. So core training is basically not only your abs, but it's basically sort of your midsection of your body, including your spine. So it's a very key component to workouts, and you may not realize that. So I'm going to sort of explain a little bit more into detail what that means, what it is, what all it trains as it relates to core training. So again, we're going to look at the importance of training your core and the scientific reasoning behind core training. So the benefits of training the core. So there's three objectives when it comes to core training. So they are core stability, which is the ability to maintain a given position by stabilizing the spine. You've got your core endurance, which is the ability to control the motion of the spine over a given duration, and your core strength with the core strength, which is the ability to control the motion of the spine. So this is basically sort of overviewing the three objectives as it relates to the core. Again, it's critical to improving your posture and it's going to help enhance your performance and it's also going to decrease the risk of injury during resistance training. So there's different types of muscles as it relates to the core, and they are categorized into two different sections. So you have the local muscles and you have the global muscles. So basically, what these mean is local is more focused on sort of a particular area. So, for example, with local muscles, you have the pelvic floor musculature and you got the quadris lumborum musculature. So for global, you've got the rectus abdominis, the obliques, abdominal obliques, I should say, the spine, latimus dorsi, and the iliopsoas. So that's all related to, all of these are musculatures or muscles of the core. So again, when I talk about global and local, I sort of want to explain a little bit into detail what that is. So the first we've got here with the local muscles is the pelvic floor. Basically, this muscle supports the contents of the pelvis. It's basically a supporting muscle and structure of the pelvis. The quadris labrum is a lateral flexion of the spine. It's sort of in the back of your spine, and it helps to elevate the pelvis. So those two muscles sort of do one specific action, and that's sort of the reasoning why they're called local muscles. Now, when you go to global muscles, they're a little bit more. There's more action going on with these types of muscles. So, with global muscles, you have your rectus abdominis, which is the first one here on the global muscles. And this primarily focuses on the trunk and spine, having flexion in the trunk and spine, rotation, and lateral flexion. So, this muscle is able to have flexion of the spine and trunk, able to rotate the spine and trunk, and able to have lateral flexion of the spine and trunk area. The external abdominal obliques as a part of the abs, this primarily focuses on spinal flexion, lateral flexion, and contralateral rotation. So being able to move in multiple directions. This is the external oblique, so this is the outside abs area. The internal obliques is sort of inward. So you got the spinal, it actually does spinal flexion, lateral flexion, and ipsilateral rotation. So again, all of these are just sort of various directions that these muscles can move. They're able to do a lot of flexion, a lot of rotations, different types of movements of that nature. So we go to the erector spinae, which is actually the muscle of the spine. So this focuses on trine and spine extension and rotation, as well as lateral flexion. Again, extension, rotation, and flexion is the main key movements of these muscles. The latimus dorsi is sort of in the back, so it's your lats, which is a part of the back. So this is the trunk spine rotation. It's able to do a trunk spine rotation in addition to the shoulder extension, adduction, and internal rotation. So it's able to do shoulder extension, adduction, rotations, anything of that sort is what the lats are able to do. So I discussed the lats, the spine. So let me go back. Oh, went too far. So we've got the last one, which is the iliopsoas. So this is a really small muscle. Again, it's all related to the core, but this muscle primarily focuses on hip flexion. It's just a very small muscle that is sort of connected to your abs, your core area. So that's what that does is it does hip flexion, but it also, in addition to that, it does hip adduction and external rotation. So it's able to do those different types of motions. So let me go back and discuss a little bit about basically a little bit into detail what local muscles are. So I've sort of explained what these different types of muscles do. Local muscles are basically attached on or near the vertebrae and often have short attachment ranges between 1 to 2 vertebrae segments. So local muscles in themselves just provide dynamic support of the spinal segments and they limit excessive compression. So these are more of a stabilizing type of musculature, I guess I should say. Now, when we're talking about the global muscles, which it sort of is sort of self-explanatory to what I said, but the global muscles are basically these muscles are positioned more superficial to the trunk, and then when compared to local core muscles, the global muscles of the core act to move the trunk and transfer loads. So global muscles are doing more. You could see like the local muscles as being more of a stabilizing top structure, and then your global muscles are transferring loads and able to do larger, sort of more excessive movements, to say it in simple terms. So that's basically what the difference is between those two types of muscles. So what we're going to talk about next is posture. So like I mentioned when we started, is posture plays an important role when it comes to training the core. It's going to help with your posture when you train the core. So the core is essential to posture of the spine. So the human spine has a natural curvature, which is has two curvatures that alternate between lordic and kyphotic curves. So overactivity of the spine can cause the development of an anterior pelvic tilt or a posterior pelvic tilt. So when you don't have the proper posture, or you have maybe you aren't being aware of your posture and you're leaning too much or anything of that sort, and you're doing it so often, you can have basically one of these conditions where you have anterior pelvic tilt, which is excessive forward rotation of the pelvis. So it's basically your spine is more forward, and then your posterior pelvic tilt is basically the opposite, where you're having excessive rotation of the pelvis that results in lesser lumbar lordosis, which is basically your back. You're basically leaning farther in your back. So that's some of the conditions that you can kind of have if you aren't fully aware of your posture. But when you implement core training, this is something that actually helps with sort of correcting your posture. And again, let me explain a little bit here when I talk about lordotic and kyphotic here, so I can explain these in a little bit in detail so you guys understand, because they are kind of pretty large terms. So basically, like I mentioned, your spine does have normal curvatures. So lordotic is the cervical and lumbar spine region, creating a concave portion of the spine. It's just basically the lower spine, and then you got your kyphotic, which is thoracic spine region. Well, actually, vice versa. So you got your lower and upper spine, which have a curvature. But again, if you're not being aware of your posture, you're going to increase that excessiveness of the curvature, basically. So another thing that I do not have mentioned here is another condition as it relates to the spine. So while the spine may exhibit small deviations from midline and the frontal plane, large curvatures of the spine can actually create a abnormal condition which is known as scoliosis. You've probably heard of scoliosis before. It's basically an abnormal curve of the spine from side to side. So again, this all relates to posture. Um, when you're training with the core, it's going to help to sort of prevent these sort of postural deviations. And that's something that I want you to be aware of. Because you're training the core, it's going to strengthen those muscles, preventing this. So, like I mentioned, I sort of went ahead of myself here, but again, the anterior pelvic tilt is excessive forward rotation of the pelvis. Posterior pelvic tilt is an excessive rotation of the pelvis. And then scoliosis is an abnormal curve of the spine from side to side. So that's some of the postural deviations when it relates to, you know, any sort of differences in your posture or not being aware of your posture. Okay, so another thing that core training actually does is it actually can enhance the performance of your workouts. So a strong and stable core can generate explosive movements needed for optimal physical performance. So the core is the foundation of producing strong and controlled movements. Improving the core can be an important critical component of improving these more movements. So again, the core is the key part to any other workout that you do. it's going to help to assist you with any other workout. So again, training this area is really going to help improve your movements. And I've sort of noticed that as I've sort of trained my core more often as after I sort of became a trainer and I became more focused on the core, implementing more core exercises. And when you train it enough, when you do have more control, you do notice that it does enhance the performance of your exercises. For example, like a Russian twist, which is basically, it's almost, you would basically would lay on a mat and then you're sort of sitting in kind of like a V shape, but you're usually like holding a medicine ball or a weight and you're sort of alternating from side to side. So with that, you have to have a lot of stability when you're doing that type of exercise. But the more that you train it, because it is a core-based workout, the more you do it enough, you start to become aware that you can stay stable for longer. Like you can sort of stay in that strong and controlled movement for a longer period of time. So that's something to be aware of is that when you do train core enough, again, that's the abdominal area mostly. Any kind of ab workout is related to the core, of course. So you're going to sort of notice that your movements are improving and you're able to sort of control your movements and do them in a more strong fashion, I guess you'd say. So the core muscle functions is critical for proper extremity movement. Optimal core muscle function has been considered modification to injury risk. So I sort of talked about this somewhat at the beginning, but there's so many benefits to training the core. And this is another one, is that it can actually reduce your risk of injury. So again, like I mentioned, it's for proper extremity movement, and it's going to create that modification to reduce the risk of injury. So for example, a prospective person from a study has demonstrated that lower postural core, hip muscle strength, and core muscle endurance were predictive of individuals who developed overuse of musculoskeletal injuries, which is basically just injuries of the muscle. So core muscle training has been found to improve balance, and other studies have shown that core strength training was an important factor in fall prevention as well. So core stability has become a key component of prevention programs aimed to decreasing extremity injuries. So that's another thing to be aware of is, again, the more you train the core, it's not only going to benefit, your movements in exercise and your performance, but it's also going to help with sort of reducing that risk of injury. So there has been a trial that has been done, a randomized controlled trial in 4 weeks of core stability training has been shown to produce similar decreases in forces at the knee during jump landing, and this is in female high school athletes actually, as opposed to two individuals who have participated in 4 weeks of plyometric training. So again, it's going to decrease that risk of injury. Okay, so core training design. So there's basically three different things as it relates to be aware of as it relates to core training. So you've got intervertebral stability, which is stability of individual segments. You've got lumbopelvic stability, which is stability of the lumbopelvic hip complex, and movement efficiency, which is improved movement quality and force output. So these are basically how a core training program is sort of structured. Another thing I want to mention before I close out, because it's the end of the presentation, but I want to mention one other thing is that core training is actually also used in rehabilitation. So this kind of goes back to some studies. It shows that research has found that individuals with chronic LBP, which is basically the lumbopelvic area, have decreased activation of certain muscles or muscle groups, including the transverse abdominis, internal obliques, pelvic floor muscles, all of the muscles that are related to basically the core. So, after evaluating more than 2,400 individuals, it demonstrated that core exercise is effective in improving outcomes of individuals who sort of have a disability with the LBP, which is basically the lumbo-pelvic area. So core stabilization exercises restore the size, activation, and endurance of the multifidus, which is the deep spine muscles. So again, it has been used, core training has been used in rehabilitation purposes as well. So not only for the prevention method, but to sort of get somebody who may have been injured to help build their strength back. So that's another thing to sort of keep in mind. So again, you know, core needs to be an essential part of your program. You need to be aware, of course, that's going to help your movement patterns, any sort of movement you do with exercise. Also, your daily life, any daily activities that you do, is going to help with your movement. Um, like I mentioned before, it's going to help with your performance, and it's going to help with the prevention of injury. And even if, you are to get injured, it can be used in the proper way. It can be used as a rehabilitation sort of exercise that you can do to gain strength back. And it has been used with certain individuals who have been injured. So that's basically all I wanted to talk about with you guys today. I hope that you found some information and value from this. I hope that I explained things a little bit better because I know there's a lot of large terms and a lot of the names of these muscles are like can be kind of confusing. But they're all sort of related to that core area. They're all connected to the core, the abdominals, all of that area, the spine. So I just wanted to sort of explain sort of what these muscles do and sort of the importance of training. So again, I really appreciate you guys for taking the time to watch this. If you do have any questions, just feel free to send me an email, um, which is brandonpart95@gmail.com. I don't have my contact information up, but my phone number is 931-434-6880 if you have any questions or, any comments about anything that I talked about today. I'm willing to answer those. Of course, you can comment here on this stream. And again, I will, just because the stream is over live, you can still watch these as they're going to be recorded. And you can also watch on YouTube. I usually post to YouTube as well. And again, you can comment there. You can comment anywhere if you have any questions or feedback on what I talked about today. So thank you guys for watching, and I will likely have another live stream next week, and I will see you guys in the next one.